Welcome back to the X Podcast. I'm with Zachary Brown and Timothy Moore. You're giving the deuces over here.
Dude, I got some energy today, man.
You got some energy.
Yeah.
Let them hear you up north is what I say.
Yeah, for those of you who are listening and not watching, I got a new shirt from Homage, which is a sports retro store, and it's an Ohio State shirt. Let them hear them up north. You seem to be confused by the concept.
He's not confused.
It took me a minute.
That team up north, the team we don't talk about, the worst team in the history of teams.
Michigan.
Well, yeah.
So and then it's about them and
TCUN.
For you, it's North Carolina.
So the shirt is saying "Scream so that Michigan can hear you."
Yes. Let them hear them up
That's
north.
Okay.
Go Bucks.
All right.
Amen.
There we go. Okay.
I'm with you.
Thank you.
Spring football game happened last Saturday.
Yeah, you know what? Let's just take a minute.
Most talented football team
exciting.
in the history of
Dude,
Ohio
this is
State.
the most talented team I think they've ever had. If
Yep.
they do not do something, if they're not in the championship game, it is a major letdown.
Yep. Hey, could this be the year that we all go to a Buckeye game together?
I don't know.
The three of us?
That'd be a dream.
Okay.
I don't know because do you have tickets? I don't have tickets. They're always sold out. They're hard to get. That's why I said I don't know.
hundreds of dollars.
And they're very expensive. So that's why I was saying, not because I wouldn't go, I would go.
Then how do people just go all the time? I see people.
There are people who have tickets. Or you have connections of people who have tickets.
You literally have to have connections. Or
It's hard to
How
get
do
them.
you not have connections?
I'm not saying I don't have connections. I'm just saying
He's
that it's
passionate about them, but that doesn't mean he has connections that are going to give him tickets that he can.
because other people are
Now,
passionate
you
about
can
it
get
too.
tickets, usually in pairs. There are people all the time, it'll usually be last minute, that are selling their tickets, and you can buy them. Partly, I just am too cheap that I don't want to spend what people want to charge to go to a Ohio State game. So I'll watch it at home. But I'll have a party. Come on over. Let's have a party. So
I was getting ready to say I will definitely win enrollment if the three of us go.
$200.
he would.
Yeah, do it.
It's worth it.
I'm not.
One time a year, it's worth it.
No.
Depending
You
on who
wouldn't
they're
pay
playing.
that.
I've been to enough games that I probably wouldn't pay $200.
But you've not
unless
been
it was
with me
big.
and him.
That's true.
Okay,
This is a
we
good
should
point.
probably.
Get
people,
going.
people are listening. Let's go.
Yeah.
All right, what else is new in y'all's lives?
The Buckeyes just had a spring game. It was pretty amazing.
Okay.
We've been doing home reno projects around the house and getting it all ready for summertime and all the fun things. We have bees and wasps all around the
Well
house.
done.
Yeah.
Well done.
Well done.
well done. Well done.
Well done.
Yeah,
well, you
so
said
we've been-
wasps.
Yes, and we've been dealing with them. So
I'm practicing.
yeah.
What about you?
Well, springtime. So
Mowing the lawn.
Mowing.
Yeah.
And I mowed yesterday evening, and then I spent probably an hour pulling weeds out of the front
did
bed.
too.
So it's like it's that season of trying to get the house looking
Yeah,
nice
we were
again
outside
for spring.
yesterday, and I was pulling weeds.
It was a beautiful day, so good to be outside.
You were hitting some irons the other day.
I did. I went and played.
With Tommy.
No, I didn't play. I went and hit a driving range for about 30 or 40 minutes with Tommy and Todd.
How'd you do?
Terrible. Not terrible. Okay, but it wasn't great.
See, this is how.
It was odd.
'Cause you got some
This
new
is
clubs,
totally,
right?
this is,
You return those
I've
ones?
had these irons. I got some new fairway woods and stuff. That I
From
didn't
the
hit.
gift card?
Yeah, no.
Oh.
I've had those since Christmas. But so I didn't, it was so weird. I didn't hardly eat anything yesterday. And so I go show up, and I don't know if it was just
This
hot.
is my shocked face.
Yeah, okay. And I literally, after swinging the club 3 times, 4 times, and Todd felt the same way for some reason. He was like, I feel really tired. I don't know why. So we were out
That
there.
is going around.
It is strange. And so I'm telling you, we were both like wiped out. We were like, I don't want to really do this. I mean, we kept staying out there and we swung and hit them, but we just had no energy.
Actually, I can relate. I told Rebecca yesterday. I said after waking up early, doing the kid thing, and then we get home, and it feels like between 5 and 8 o'clock at night. It's like the longest 3 hours of my life until they're in bed.
Because you're with your family?
No, that's not true.
Well, I just wanted to clarify for everybody listening and
Not
watching.
true.
It's the witching hour.
Yeah.
It is the witching hour.
It is.
And then after they're all asleep at 8:30, I come downstairs and I always have good intentions. I'm gonna read this book. I'm gonna do this thing. I'm gonna do something for myself. And then I hit the couch and I'm literally asleep on the couch by 9 o'clock, like almost every night.
Really?
Oh yeah.
That didn't happen last night.
My only
you and I were texting while the Lakers were playing. Anyways,
I did. Yeah,
you did fall asleep.
Tommy
before
was
I
watching
finished.
the Lakers
I
while
watched
we're at the
it.
gym.
I watched the end of it.
I'm like that on Sundays. I always Sundays is the one day that I'll still be like, okay, I need to get this done. I still want to do this amount of work or this writing or whatever. So, nope.
No.
I can, Sundays are for napping and running.
Yeah.
I can take a nap. I can go for a run. I can go to the gym and just do something light. Go cafe that night. But I can just not. I don't know. My brain's mush on Sundays.
Yeah.
All right.
So life is good.
All right. Let's go.
Let's do it.
What you got?
we didn't talk about this, but Iran did just attack Israel.
Yes.
That's a pretty big deal.
Dude, the Iron Dome videos
It's crazy.
of that thing.
Did I send you one? I think I sent you.
No. You sent me a link, but I ended up finding a different one.
Okay.
I don't know the one you sent me had video. But I just ended up in reading about it.
Yeah,
There's one video, and it's insane just seeing explosions all in the air and what was like 300 rockets that were fired from Hezbollah into Iran, or like it was something like that. On the first
missiles and
I don't know if
drones.
there's been more since.
Oh,
I think it was just a
the
one-time.
proxies have been still attacking.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But no, it's crazy. I was listening. I was Jon Stewart last night. He came out with and one of the funny things he said, he's like, "Who's on whose side now?" Because it wasn't 99.9% of them were like knocked out of the sky. A lot of them by us, but also Jordan actually neutralized a lot of the missiles and drones going over their airspace. And along with, was it Egypt or Saudi Arabia?
I think Jordan's kind of an ally
Yeah.
of the U.S.
Yes, but I thought also kind of Israel.
They might be. I don't know, but
There are several other countries over there that I just, in my mind, assumed hated Israel that apparently were also helping give advance notice to Israel. And it's just so interesting. It's kind of like, wait, who's with who? But anyways, there's a lot. There's a much deeper, serious conversation maybe in the future we'll have around everything going on.
They're going to hit back?
I think they will.
Big or small?
I think it'll be big.
They're saying it's going to be more muted. I don't know who they is.
Well, President Biden was requesting that they don't retaliate, right?
Yeah, but then they met twice, Israel's war cabinet, and apparently
I think they're
came
up
out
to 5.
saying,
I think they're up to 5 times.
Oh, wow.
Is what I just saw in the headlines.
well, after one of the last ones, they came out and said there was, and I saw one of the quotes, and this made sense. They said because due to the amount of missiles and drones, and what they said,
it was a large attack.
It was a large attack.
It wasn't a small attack.
Yeah, and their proxies are still attacking.
I think they're in a really tough position because I think they know that they have they put tons of focus and energy into Gaza, and so now you have this coming, and so probably some of it is trying to calculate: can we handle all this?
Yeah.
Who's going to continue to supply us with stuff so that we can try to handle all this? Like they're surrounded,
and Israel's kind of in the same way that Russia did when they invaded Ukraine. Israel's begun isolating themselves from the rest of the world by the Gaza treatment. I mean,
they haven't made any fans.
No.
From around the world. So just
a lot going on.
There's a lot going on in that area.
So anyways, I just thought we could catch up for a minute. I also, one of the things that we've brought up again over the last few weeks is one of the hopes of this table is not just to have conversations around everything life and culture, but also to create a space to elevate the way we think. That I always want to continue to grow in my thought processes, my perspective, to sift through things at a high level. And so we invite feedback. And it's great. We were talking about a few weeks ago, I said something even just in passing about isolationism. And someone sent in, an email, hey, I disagree with you. You're wrong. And but we had a fun give and take. And then we had lunch and just had the best conversation where we're able to challenge each other's perspectives. And so we love and value feedback. But all that to say, we have had some interesting feedback, comments on some of our last couple podcasts on our YouTube. So I just thought it could be fun just to sift through a few and just kind of put them out on the table.
Yeah.
To dissect, not in again, we ask for feedback, so we value it. But when when I send feedback to someone on social media or somebody sends feedback to us on podcasts, I also consider that fair game to assess what's being said.
Yeah.
And to say, okay, what can we learn?
Mm-hmm.
Where are there false assumptions?
Yeah.
Where is there maybe faulty thinking on one side or the other? So anyways, a couple weeks ago, you really wanted to do a podcast on...
I did? No. This one was your idea. Outrage culture. I remember
outrage
this.
culture. Biden Easter.
Well, Biden Easter one.
Yeah.
That was your idea.
So now if you've not listened to it, you should go back and listen to it, number one. Number two, to give a little bit of context, and I think it's important before I read the response, we didn't get into any real moral discussion about anything like abortion or...
Well, the topic was transgender
no.
with Easter.
Literally.
Right? We didn't talk about transgenderism.
We didn't talk about transgenderism.
We kept it at the response.
The whole premise was, President... Yeah, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Just that he signs like a declaration that this is a national day of what is it?
Transgender Visibility Day.
Yes, awareness.
Yes.
And it's been that day for decades now.
Mm-hmm.
Not decades, but
since 2009.
2009. So a little over a decade.
A little over a decade.
And he signed this 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And it was
3 years ago.
And he was just recognizing it, and it just so happens that day also fell on Easter Sunday.
Yes, and just so happened to fall on Easter Sunday, along with the other thing he tweeted about that day, like Farmers, United Farmers Day. It was like 3 days that just so happened to fall on Easter. He tweeted about all of them and actually even gave, for more than most political leaders I saw, this is not a defense of President Biden.
Sounds like it.
But
bring your comments.
I'm saying this because of what's been said about him in response to this. But it's tweeted something about warmest wishes to Christians around the world that are celebrating the hope of Christ's resurrection, which I was actually kind of shocked that it was that straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, there was a narrative created that, Biden's redefining Easter and it's an attack on Easter. And just people just took that narrative without the context and began running with it, and just outrage culture went. And in all fairness, to set the table for it, we gave several examples of how the left has done this before we even went into this. So the whole point was to say, hey, this is not as much a political discussion as to say we've got to not just buy hook, line, and sinker whatever we hear, especially if we find ourselves in an echo chamber on either side. We've got to do research, not assume the worst of each other, and actually make sure that we're not letting outrage culture send us into a frenzy. So that was the whole point. We didn't even get into it. With that said, and you even said towards the end, so if this outrages you, that may point to something. So here's the comment we got.
You're trying to blame me.
Here's the comment we got. How far can you keep straddling the fence? Several question marks and exclamation points. It amazes me when I listen to these podcasts how far you go. I'm assuming that's directed to me. Biden, who is for abortion. Whoa. And he is somehow appeasing Christian voters about Easter. If you do not stand for something, you will fall for everything.
Yeah, I've heard that phrase. Wait, was that the quote?
That's
the comment?
That was the comment.
Well, wait. We didn't talk about abortion.
Well, that's kind of my point.
What in the world?
So there's a lot of cliches and stuff thrown in that I don't know. We'll start with you.
Well, someone didn't actually listen to the podcast. I'm going to just throw that out there. So
I'm not sure that person did either.
Yeah.
That was kind of my thought.
Oh.
I mean, are they connecting the fact that typically, let's just say it, Democrats are pro-choice in the way that they approach politics, and so are they conflating the fact that maybe you're supporting Biden with the fact that you are pro-choice? Is that what they're trying to say?
That's
kind of what I'm seeing or reading that and hearing it.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I kind of want to look at these comments, because to me, I was like, oh man, the conversation we had with the outrage culture and thinking higher, not in a mean way, but this comment to me highlighted why those conversations matter.
Okay.
Because Yeah, there's just so much to this. I mean, number one, I never said I support Biden. I think all of us have been honest. We're like, man, will somebody please step in at the 11th hour? Oh my gosh, there's got to be another choice
on both sides.
Our whole point was really just trying to put ideas on the table,
Yeah.
not back or support a party.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I do think it's pretty limited thinking to just anybody that would support the left, let's say, or Biden to immediately just pick that one hot button topic of abortion and then just
But that's what the right
off.
does. That's what
Yeah.
most of the people on the right do.
So
There's only one subject matter that matters.
and then the quote at the end.
It's true for both sides.
If you do not, it's true for both sides. Yeah.
Mhm.
If you support somebody on the right, maybe it's for policy or whatever. That doesn't mean you're a racist, a white supremacist, or you're
Right.
ignorant or whatever. We love to just stereotype each other.
Mhm.
But then if you do not stand for something, you'll fall for anything. So, anyways, I just found it more than anything a little amusing. But I just, didn't know if y'all had any.
How long will you straddle the fence?
How long will I straddle the fence?
In other words, pick a political side.
Yeah.
And just be open
Well,
and
'cause my
honest
mind
about
went
it. That's what I
to-
get. Be honest about it and pick a side. If you hit one or the other. And it's
What-
wait, why do we have to pick a side?
Yeah,
Why
that
should
is a
we
good
just
point.
because we've got some bipartisan governmental system and we all said, I think, or I know, I was like, I feel politically homeless. I'm
Yeah.
not going
Yeah.
to just side with the right because supposedly that's what Christians do. There's a lot of really bad leaders and bad ideas that come out of the right and left. And so
Yeah.
I find myself way more politically homeless than I do
Yes.
anything. And so I think this binary kind of I'm trying to be nice, but I think this binary based thinking of you got to be, if you're on this team or this team, you got to pick a team. Well, when both teams suck,
Yeah.
I'm just not going to pick a team,
Yeah.
which might mean I don't play.
Yeah.
And that's my prerogative.
Yeah.
But to just try to go, well, if you're not on this team, then we know who you really are. You don't know. So there's a lot of false assumptions that are being made there.
Yeah.
It's also ironic. I don't know if you guys have seen President Trump came out with a plan for like what
His name's Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. He's not
Former president.
Former President Trump. We'll just say that. Has come out.
I'm just
and-
trying to get
and-
some people riled up because it's funny. There's a lot of people that are still say he's president.
He has a plan for what abortion is going to look like if he's reelected.
I've heard.
Oh, this is
And,
true.
And
it's
that
funny.
did not go over well with
Oh, dude, he's getting
people.
torn apart.
Actually, that's a good point. Can we respond to this person's comment and ask him what he thinks of the Republican candidate and what they had to say about abortion?
I mean, some
And
people,
ask him what
some people that I follow on social media, are quite literally saying there's now not a choice between a pro-life and a pro-choice candidate. It's now a choice between two pro-choice candidates.
Okay.
That's
So now what do we
that's
do?
a
Now what do you
great-
do if we now take an abortion is equal on both sides? In other words, they're going to have the same type of policy. What do you do now?
No, that's a great point because I don't like it when people critique politicians for ever changing their minds. It's like, okay, if you're a growing person, you're going to evolve, and eventually your mindset's going to be textured and change and evolve and grow, and people shouldn't just immediately be labeled, oh, you're a flip-flopper, if you decide that, oh, through study and research and thought, I've changed my mind. Having said that, I did see a stat the other day when it came to former President Trump and abortion that he has flipped on the issue. I think it was as high as 16 times over the years. That's high.
Mm-hmm.
He's done a lot of research.
That could be it.
Or
And so,
could be for political reasons.
yeah, I'm just saying that is an interesting insight. If, number one, abortion is one of about 20 really important issues. But if both sides are now pro-choice, then I think even
What are you
going
gonna do?
Yeah.
When that was your one thing that you based everything on, you're in trouble.
And to be fair, his stances would still be more moderate
Yeah.
than most on the left.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, what is it? It's a 15-week, only in terms of states should decide,
States
and he's
should decide,
against.
there should always be exceptions for rape, incest, and murder, or murder.
Murder.
Rape, in incest.
Or
And
the
life to the
mother's
mother.
life of the
Life of the
mother.
mother.
if
Yeah,
it's
that's what I
endangered.
meant. Sorry. And then I think you would be in favor. I don't want to put words. You fact check me on this. Of like a 15-week national ban, but he would be okay with states deciding it as well.
See, what's interesting is that you had Republican candidates that were running, and if they made it in, I wonder what people would say again. Like Nikki Haley's the same way. She
you guys
has
know-
very similar.
You guys know
she-
who Carrie Lake is?
Yes.
She's
Utah?
Firebrand,
Yes, yes.
Arizona.
Arizona.
Arizona, that's right.
Firebrand, conservative in
Mhm.
Arizona. She's running for governor. And she was just out doing a media blitz and talking about how, I mean, some of the language that she uses is literally like, I believe all Arizonians should have a choice in how they do things.
Wow.
And she's
Conservative Firebrand
yeah,
running for governor.
yeah.
On the Republican ticket.
I'm just saying that Nikki tried to. I think she tried to bring. I remember this to the Republican debates and tried to say, look, this is
Well, they're
you're
getting
not
killed on
gonna-
the
we're
issue
n-
nationally.
huh?
They're getting killed on the issue.
absolutely
nationally.
from a conservative standpoint, and literally said, look, none of you candidates are being honest. You talk like, oh, I'm going to go out and do that. You aren't doing anything. You're never going to get anything passed through Congress because even there are many conservatives that don't agree with a complete ban, that want some level or pro-choice conservatives. They do exist. And so, she was like, I think we should at least enact, it was similar, some type of, 15-week or some type of ban.
Yeah.
That it would be national to say this. It's getting to a point where you got, again, we're getting into abortion, all this stuff, but it gets to a point where it's getting more barbaric.
Yeah.
When this baby, I'm going to say baby, growing in there can feel
Right.
everything,
Yeah.
and there's
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
again, I'm just saying the different arguments that people have kind of brought to it, and
Yeah.
Yep.
We'll just go back and preface. I mean, all three of us view this issue not just as a political one, but it goes beyond that,
Oh,
even
yeah.
into a moral issue, and all of us fall
I did a message
on
on
a
it.
very
I've said what
conservative.
I feel about it.
Yeah.
In a very long message about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just
And
think
I'm pro-life.
back
So-
to the comment, we've
Yes.
talked about it ad nauseum, but if we can't have honest conversations about anything going on in culture without the immediate assumption of such an us versus them mindset that we're labeled, oh, you must be Republican, or oh, you must be Democrat, or what, then that's an issue that we're actually trying to address with this podcast, number one. Number two, we didn't talk about any moral issues. So to come to the conclusion that we're not standing on a moral issue because we had an honest conversation about a political moment, I just don't think. I think it's a little
Well,
bit
one of the
short-sighted.
things that I can say, just because of some feedback that I got after last Sunday, is that I've found that people kind of, this is a kind of sad reality. I think it's far worse than sitting even in church on a Sunday in social media and the way it is. I think I'm starting to really think people just hear what they want to hear.
Yes, that's true.
And not what is actually being said.
Yes.
Because
Oh,
I
yeah.
had I said with you guys some feedback that was literally the exact opposite of what I said and what I believe.
Yeah.
And they're like, I had to leave. I just can't believe that you would try to use this and say this, this, and this. And I literally had to write them back and go, that's not what I said.
Yeah.
Like, and it's again, false assumption. You're assuming something that you can ask anybody who knows me. It's the exact opposite.
Right.
And that's why we're doing it. And so it just kind of made me realize it's like, man, it doesn't matter what you say. If people want to hear something and they're listening and they put something together, 2 and 2, all of a sudden they've kind of created a narrative that is like, that's not even what is being said.
Yeah. No, it's true. I think with your message and with this podcast, the person just must not have listened.
Are we saying it's the same person?
Mm.
Oh, you're just saying in general.
Yes, in
I
general,
I
yeah.
just don't.
Yeah.
Or they were listening for,
Yep.
something they wanted to hear.
Have we spent a lot of time digesting why that is?
White people hear what they want to hear?
Yeah,
Oh, I don't.
my observation is it's getting worse, because I think
Mm-hmm.
when you look back culturally, I mean, you go back thousands of years to like Greek philosophy, and the whole concept was people would come and meet in the center of a town, and they would have arguments and hear different sides, and
Sure.
there was respect. And it just seems like whether it's, I mean, I think I sent you stories the other day of someone we follow, and this is more of a Christian subcontext of like someone posting information about how different churches approach
Yeah.
social media platforms and different things like that, and that person was getting a lot of hate for elevating certain churches and different things. It just seems like whether it's secular or sacred spaces, just that phenomenon that you're talking about. People hear what they want to hear, they only see what they want to see, and then they're going to lob criticism. That seems to be growing rather than diminishing in our current culture.
There's probably a lot of reasons for that. I don't think it's just one.
Yeah. And we've talked about echo chambers. I think
echo chambers are peace.
I think another way to look at it is if you dig yourself into a point of view, then you only see the view from your point of view. So if you've decided I'm only going to stand on this particular mountain, everything you see is going to be filtered through where you've chosen to stand. Instead of saying, in that sense, if I'm going to stretch the metaphor, it's only when you're in the humble place of the valley that you can see all points of view. But if you stand on the high perch of arrogance and dogmatism, it's going to filter the way you see everything else.
I mean, I've heard we've talked about echo chambers a lot. I'm not saying that that's not a true thing. Let me ask this question: do we feel like we've lost the ability to think critically?
Well, yeah, but I think it's connected.
Yeah. I just think we have become so blinded to our own bias that we don't understand that it is affecting the lens through which we not only see but hear other people. And I think I think we are also, I think language has things to do with this. I think that we are so trained within our groups, within our tribes, within our social. I think we're trained by language that when somebody uses language that either doesn't fit the narrative of what you think they should, because I intentionally, I know we do, and just in general as a church, we're very intentional with using very specific language when communicating. And I am constantly trying to filter out really cliche Christian phrases, sometimes deep theological terms that have a lot of certain meaning and that may, that haven't been, unless you nuance it, they're not really, you don't know how it's going to land. So I do that, and I think sometimes when you do that, people start to make assumptions of what you believe because you're using different language that maybe they would hear somebody else with a different persuasion use, even if you don't hold that value. And so I don't think it's any one thing. I think all of those things have aided in this. I also think that we have stopped listening to other people.
Yeah, we talked about that.
I just think we just, I don't think we care. I think we've made up our minds. We've stopped listening. And so I think what happens is if you're not listening to hear what that person has to say, but you're listening for a way to refute it, to rebut against it, and you're looking, then you are only hearing part of what they're saying, and you're not actually listening to the whole thing. And I think, I'm not saying that's what this person did on Sunday. I'm saying people are doing that, and they're reading between the lines instead of listening to what that person's actually trying to say.
Yeah, it's actually a perfect segue into one of the comments we got from last week. Did you hear this one?
No, he didn't.
So, conversation on mega churches, critical spirit towards mega churches. People were blowing me up trying to figure out who you're talking about.
I had someone text me this morning and go, who are you talking about? Was it this person? I said, actually, no, but that was one of the people that we were thinking of at the time.
So basically, you're just talking, you're just being honest pet peeve of feeling like there's mega churches are always lumped in together, stereotyped together, and there's just been a lot of hate thrown its way. So, got a couple comments on it. This one was interesting. It's a little bit longer, but I think it's worth reading all of it.
Should we pause in and break into different times and respond to it? Or listen to the whole thing?
Wait,
just listen to the whole comment. I like to hear the whole thing in context.
You do?
Yeah, okay. It's probably going to...
Okay.
You probably need to hear the whole thing. Okay. People might just be sensing the language of the NAR, in parentheses, if we don't know what that is, New Apostolic Reformation.
NRA.
The NAR. New Apostolic Reformation without realizing it. I know I did, but had no language for it. While I know a lot of pastors have the heart to reach their city and help everyone, it will turn people off if they hear NAR speech. It's not done intentionally. Most people I know have always been in a church that is NAR influenced. What I mean by that is churches like Bethel, Hillsong, Elevation, or IHOP, which most churches have been influenced by. The above churches will say that they are not NAR, but their theology is, and that is Christianity mixed with New Age, Gnosticism, and the prosperity gospel. Most pastors don't even know they're being influenced by this and possibly don't even know the training to recognize it. Both of you even use some of that language without realizing it. And unfortunately, the criticism is warranted in those cases. Now, I'm not saying that your church is of the devil and throw out everything. What I and other people are asking is please investigate who and what you follow with a critical eye. It may seem good and you know their heart, but you don't. Unfortunately, Mike Bickle is a prime example of that. If you're not familiar, that's the IOP guy. Many people said he wasn't that type of person, yet it came out he was.
Yeah.
Fruit takes time to grow, and just because it looks good doesn't mean it always is on the inside. I say this as one getting their degree in ministry, and I can see both sides. It's not always black and white. There tends to be quite a bit of gray, and that's where it can get dangerous. And then he lists books if we're interested in checking out NAR.
Mm-hmm. I'd be curious what parts of the language he would pick up and say is that.
What language
I've
do you
not
think he's
heard
referring
that term
to?
before either. Have you heard that term before?
Yeah. Yeah.
I have heard it before. I'm just not familiar with like what's. I was like, oh, is
What
there
are
a
the
connection to
tenets?
what are the language that he's referring
Yes.
to or she's referring to that we use?
Okay, one thing that comes to mind that again, someone who's not familiar with it, but like the language of I know, like a pastor at one of the churches that he mentioned has been criticized for this before, and it's language of like "you are enough." Like that would be an example of a phrase that would probably qualify under this movement or sort of thing.
Yeah. Are you looking up language?
Yeah, I was trying to find
NAR?
to see like specific. I mean, of like which ones. You know what I mean? And some of this is like, yeah. It's funny because some of it has some connection that doesn't seem at all less to do with the church and more to do with political stuff.
Yeah, I think if you're, yeah, if you're listening to this again, we welcome feedback.
Yeah.
Welcome pushback. I think a few things fly to my mind. Number one, I'd love email some examples. I'd love to hear your examples of where you and I used NAR language, and beyond that, beyond the NAR framework, why it's unhelpful or dangerous. I think, from a 30,000 foot view, like my immediate thought is this is where seminary can be incredibly helpful and incredibly dangerous. Because if you're like, for instance, we're talking about frameworks. If you look at NAR, you use that. That is a framework given to you by other human beings by which to filter theology and other churches. And it might be helpful, but it's also just a framework, so it has its limitations. And so I think my caution is just be careful not to take any framework someone gives you and treat it as dogmatic truth. Because once you've done that, you've now, from your own admission, filtering everything that anybody says or does through that language. The truth is, there might be one of those leaders that is using language, and there's a reason they use language, and it could be true language. But now your mind's been trained to only see it through this filter, so you lump churches together. Because I can tell you, all those churches you just mentioned, there may be some common strands.
Yeah,
but that framework was given to you by somebody, and it has limitations. So I would just say, where it's helpful, let it be helpful. Because here's where I would caution this person writing this in to be careful, and we can all be guilty of this. If you adopt frameworks dogmatically enough, arrogance creeps in because you forget to have enough humility to realize that we're all influenced by somebody. There's not one of the three of us at this table, and there's not any pastor, and there's not any movement that's influenced. So you could create this framework that almost puts you on a pedestal to say, yeah, they're influenced and don't even realize it. And any one of us at this table could look at somebody and say, yeah, they're influenced by Calvinism and don't realize it. Right. Yeah, they're influenced by this, and say it in a derogatory way. And they're influenced by this and don't realize it. They're influenced. Yeah. I also don't love the Mike Bickle example because I think in any movement, in any denomination, we can pick a leader that ended up having a bad ending and crucify not just them, but the whole organization off of it. Like this person, for all I know, the way they're looking at it, because a lot of times Reformed theologians use this kind of language that he's using. I could pick off the leader of Reformed theology if I wanted to. John Calvin, the dude ended up being associated with murder. That's a pretty dark ending.
Yeah.
So half of Protestant theology let's cancel because it turned out the leader. There is not a leader of any. And here's where it's so tricky. Here's where life gets tricky. And just because a leader falls doesn't mean everything they said was wrong.
Yeah.
You should care about the, to be cheesy about it, you should care about the biography of somebody to really follow their theology.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, there's this trickiness in the human life where God only uses imperfect people. God only uses broken people. God only uses flawed leaders.
I feel like some of which, so even just because I was trying to find like, okay, how do I assess what language this person is referring to, like to lump in with different people, and just like the quick stuff of like what I found while you were just talking is funny. It almost seems like it's the label that is given to, I want to say, it really appeals more to the whole, if you are a church that believes in the fivefold ministry, if you're a church that believes in the apostolic ministry of, it's like church planting without being connected to a denomination, or Pentecostalism mixed with evangelicalism. I can't even say that word. That's, then you use if you believe of any of those pieces, then it's like you're being lumped in with, I want to say, some of the more extreme. And so I think it's a label that is used, I want to say this, and I'm not saying it to be negative about it, but like someone or a church like Bethel that puts a high emphasis on spiritual healings and experience over Scripture. And so that's kind of like, but to me, just again, I've heard about this before. I knew very little about it, and so with doing these comments on the fly, with looking it up, I feel like
my comments are more 30,000 foot.
Yeah, but I feel like but I even feel like that approach, even just again, stuff I'm reading about it, is it's creating extremes. It's creating dichotomies out of extremes, like, oh, well, if you believe and you use language to talk about you can encounter and experience God and it does this or that, then you're lumped in with a ministry or something that some of us would look at with like, yeah, there's some things that give me pause and concern about that. And it's like you can make a whole lot of false assumptions because you think somebody used the language that they're identifying with because of that. I just think it's crazy that we would take and go, this language is classified with this type of belief system because they've used this language.
Okay, so I agree with what you guys are saying and where you're coming from. I'm just curious because it does seem like when it comes to megachurches, some of the ones that this person mentioned, Elevation, Bethel, IHOP, what was the other one?
Probably Hillsong, I'm sure.
Hillsong. We could probably throw Joel Osteen's church into that mix as well.
Yeah, IHOP, Elevation, Hillsong, Bethel.
Probably throw Joel Osteen's. Why? Let me ask this question to you. Why is it that those churches in particular seem to cause a lot of questions around their ministries or what's going on? Like, it just seems like when most people bring up questions or concerns about megachurches and their teachings, those are the ones that are brought up.
Yeah, I think several reasons. The first one that just comes to mind is tall poppy syndrome. It's just easy to pick on the big ones. I think a lot of it is just jealousy. I hate to say that. I think some of it's jealousy that we theologize. I honestly think that's a lot of it. I think let's just be honest, theology is beautiful and dangerous. What is it Paul said? Knowledge puffs up, love edifies. When a lot of seminary and theological training comes, if it is not just mixed deeply with humility, love, sacrificial giving, and a heart that still bleeds to reach people that are far from God, it creates spiritual elitism. And I think there's a spiritual elitism niche in Christian subculture that it's almost like a connoisseur of fine wines. And when you see these big, what they look at in their minds as watered down commercial malls of theology, I mean, I think some people take pleasure in just slicing them up.
Oh yeah.
I think that's part of it. I think too, like people. I mean, look, all those churches are so different, and there are things with all those churches that I agree with and disagree with.
I was saying, are there valid criticisms?
Absolutely, but I think the
Sure.
valid criticisms are individual
Yes.
more than they are communal.
Yeah.
Like
That's-
Bethel, I'm very careful because I always want to champion things. We've talked to people
Yep.
that know Bill Johnson. I actually think Bill Johnson is an incredible man of God, and I think he's as sincere and legitimate as it comes. And I think that Bethel has helped expand worship music. I mean, I listen to their songs, think it's amazing. And I'm all for a fullness of spiritual gifts and the expression of the gifts. Having said that, I've just talked to so many people that have been around it. The culture does not seem healthy. And some of the weirdness and craziness that comes out of it does not seem healthy.
Yeah.
And even saying that, I don't, because, I just try to be so careful of what my place is to say and not say. So I could go down the line of all those churches of things that I know people that go on there. It's like, yeah, I agree with them there. I disagree with them there. What I don't like is for me to have a forced classifier through which I lump them together because they don't all come from NAR. They would all tell you, I mean, if you asked Bill Johnson, he would trace the roots of their culture to Azusa Street and to historic revivals. And they've had all different kind of influences. Same thing with Hillsong and Elevation. They have all different things that have made them who they are.
Not to mention, Elevation was part of the Baptist.
They come from the Southern Baptist roots.
They might still be.
No, they're not. They disconnected.
Oh, they
after the
disconnected?
Rick Warren thing.
Okay.
And then I think the second thing is
From what I
those
understand.
churches, Bethel-ish, but especially the other churches, like when you look at like an Elevation, I think in a weird way, people get mad at them for the same reason they got mad at Jesus hanging out with sinners.
Mm-hmm.
Any person or organization that has a heart to reach the lost and has a heart to reach people far from God that isn't churchy and that actually like goes out of their way and intentionality with their language and their accessibility to invite whosoever will, religious people hate them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A variety of things come to my mind, and I think what's funny is that we have this label that none of the churches that are being labeled with it assume or have been a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't have Elevation Church and Bethel going out and go, yeah, we're part of the new Apostolic Reformation.
Yeah.
No, what we have is we have outside groups who have tried to lump them all together and stick a label on them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, there are, as you said, I mean, because we're in this industry, I hate to say it that way, but I'm just saying because we're in ministry and we're connected to people and we kind of are exposed to other ministries and we're always trying to, learn from different ministries. So there's a level where I guess I'm saying beneath the surface, we are kind of connected at times to different ministries. And I know people who've worked at Elevation. I know people who worked there for a very long time. I don't know if I know anybody that works at Bethel, but I've known people who worked at Hillsong, like just different things, right? I think because of that, we have a perspective where there are certain things that we go, I really think they do that well.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's biblical.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's certain things that go, I don't really like the way that makes me feel, and I wouldn't do it myself.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean I would lump all of them into some category and go, you're apostate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a couple issues is that I think we have today, and we've just never had this before, that through social media and through other things, is that we can take any seminary student with any particular theological preference.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you're Reformed or you're not, whether you're this or not, because anybody who's Reformed is going to think anybody that believes in, to an extent in any version of charismatic Pentecostalism is you're in the wrong theologically. And we can sit here and argue all this stuff theologically, but the the most annoying thing for me, and this is a little bit what I was speaking to, and so, I mean, I appreciate this person, and I appreciate that they were trying not to make assumptions about us.
Yeah.
Thinking we're somehow in this group that none of those people even believe they're in a group.
Yeah.
Because of certain language that we might use. And but I think this kind of goes back to like, man, anybody can get an education, and anybody can go to seminary, and anybody can have a theological persuasion, and now anybody can have a mic, and anybody can have this, and now they can just sit there and just rant and rave about how this person is such an apostate, this person is a false teacher, and this person is this, because I've seen so many of those videos about so many different people.
People literally build channels with hundreds of thousands of followers
just on showing
hate
videos and picking small pieces out of messages.
Yes.
I listen to some of those. I've listened to Stephen for years. There's some things I find of great value. There are some things I'm like, I don't know about if I'm all that. But I'm not going to sit around and turn around and go, oh, he's a false teacher. I'm not going to sit around and I'm not going to be critical.
Yeah.
One of our favorite podcasters is dropping another video podcast about his Easter message.
This is my.
Well, and I didn't find this email hateful.
No, I didn't either.
I actually appreciate it. My caution would be don't allow. It's amazing you're going to seminary.
Yeah.
Learn. Just realize, number one, and this is another assumption. Maybe this is a pride thing on my end. Is some people don't take into account that the pastors they're critiquing, they've also gone to seminary and spent their whole life studying. They have other people that they actually respect theologically that do hold them accountable. And so part of it is, do you have a place to speak into something? There was a day when you had to earn the right to be heard.
Yes.
Being a seminary student's amazing. Don't let the frameworks that are shoved onto you become a prison through which you see things the rest of your life and lump people into things. And I love what you said. I think a good, when it comes to charitable assumption, a good rule of thumb is don't define people by what they don't define themselves as. Yeah. I thought it was hilarious when Donald Miller, about 10 years ago, he goes, you know what I just found out about myself last week? I'm a postmodern Christian. He was like, now I'm going to be honest. I don't even know what that means. He goes, I'm just trying to follow Jesus and work out my own faith. But apparently there's a postmodern movement from hell, and I'm the poster boy for it. Glad to find that out. Yeah. It was like I heard Erwin McManus say that about Mosaic. He's like, oh, we're a seeker-friendly church. Didn't even know what that meant. Never even heard of Bill Hybels.
But that's what I mean when people associate you because without knowing you and your heart and your study or your theology, but because you use language where it's like, yeah, I care about reaching the lost. Oh, you're one of those churches that sells out to the gospel and you'll just do whatever to get people in the door. Well, I didn't say that. But I guess you did. Yeah. And I guess I said I care about the lost. And the gospel is a priority. So I guess I am then. You know what I mean? It's like, again, why are we I don't. Yeah. So I do appreciate the comment. Yeah. I'm not trying to be critical of that person or comment. I appreciate that bringing it. I loved what you said because I remember going to school. And when I was in school, I did not agree with my theology professor in school. And yet what I loved is I had a theology professor that said, my goal is not to get you to believe what I believe, but to get you to a place where you know what you believe and why you believe it. And we just gotten to a point where it's, again, this is that. It's like if you're an Arminian, then you're like, if you're Calvinistic, you don't even believe in Jesus.
Right.
It's like, what? That's, where do we end up fighting over these small, things? And
on that note, I'll read one last comment. This is the one above it, and I think this hits more to the spirit of what you were saying last week.
Yeah.
This person says, it is okay to be subject to criticism as long as it is based on Scripture. The Bible is clear that there will be many false teachers, so for one to keep themselves on guard by comparing what people say in the name of God to the Word of God is very okay. It is not a spirit of criticism.
Wait. Was that a response to the other person's comment?
No, to our podcast. I took from that.
Wait, we didn't even talk about that.
Well, I think what this person is saying is
criticism.
Like I think this person took out of our conversation.
Okay.
You don't want to be criticized, but criticism is okay.
No. This was not about not being criticized.
Yeah, right.
Is that what you're trying to say? Like, is that what you're trying to help?
Yes. This person is. I'll read it again. You tell me what you think.
Read it again.
This person says, responding to our
Sure.
podcast last
Yeah,
week,
yeah.
where you were frustrated about megachurch critics and all that. It is okay to be subjected to criticism as long as it is based on Scripture. The Bible is clear that there will be many false teachers. So for one to keep themselves on guard by comparing what people say in the name of God to the Word of God is very okay. It is not a spirit of criticism.
Okay. My point is that's not what our podcast was about. I understand what that person's saying, but this is why. I just want to go back to this is what's also frustrating. I can't control what people want to hear. The whole, maybe it was the spirit of, maybe there's certain pieces, so I'm not trying to say that it wasn't, but it wasn't about the idea of that churches should not, that pastors and other people should never be above criticism. Mm-hmm. The conversation was generalizing, stereotyping, that all mega churches that's wrong, or that's a problem. That's what it was, that there's just constant, and honestly, not even a mega church. Part of what it was is the pet peeve is just there's just constant negative, overly negative critique, not individual specific, because that person is preaching something that's not from Scripture, and that it is they're preaching something that's antithetical to the gospel or Scripture. That's not what our conversation was about. I'm not talking about individual pastors. Again, maybe we just didn't do a very good job in that conversation doing it, because both those comments really didn't have to do with either the spirit or what we were talking about, which is this idea of a generalization, a general accusation even brought against the size of a church. Has nothing to do with, we're not talking about what the church teaches, doesn't teach, the size of a church, that it's like not the right way to do church, that it's not the right way to disciple, that's a problem. And I'm just, that's what the podcast was about, not about individual people and that person's teaching something that is not scriptural.
Yeah, I don't know if I've anything crazy to add, other than I just think it seems to me like a lot of people get really confused on even how to apply biblical criticism to people or to churches or to different things like that. Like, I don't know, people take Matthew 18 very I don't know, literally sometimes, or sometimes they don't follow Matthew 18. It seems to me like that in that comment they were attacking you guys in your conversation about that. But like you said, because I know the context of the conversation, what you guys were talking about, that's not what you guys were even speaking to. No. You guys were speaking to someone who had thoughts about churches of a certain size and how they do things in general, and the structure of churches and how churches kind of operate, not even with biblical teaching, or two different things. And I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's good.
All I was going to say was, it seems like people really, like, I know the Bible talks about testing false teachers. We were just talking about a passage earlier today that talks, be on the lookout for false teachers, and all these different types of things. But I don't know, it seems like we spend a lot of time looking out for false teachers. And sometimes I wonder if we don't, in our culture, in our society, we're so on guard for that kind of stuff that we find the boogeyman in every closet, every person who is speaking this, speaking that. And it's like, and then the minute you start thinking that way, then you start connecting dots and teachings and what people are saying and taking things out of context. And it just, I don't know, you get off the rails real fast.
No, I think there's two great points in what you said. Yeah, we become almost like the Gestapo, where we're like just trying to fault find. I mean, Scripture literally says don't be fault finding people. But then also what you said is like, we don't know how to apply it. Like, if you don't think I have opinions on things, if you don't think that I have opinions anytime I hear a message or read a book or go to a church, like, I have thoughts, opinions, convictions. And I understand there's a time and place for people maybe that sense a prophetic voice to whatever, but to me, I do these things.
That's NAR language.
Yeah,
Prophetic voice.
yeah.
I'm just
I do these things when it says to be on guard and compare Scripture. I do that, but I'm able to do that privately whenever I read a book. I'm internally doing that. I'm internally deciding, okay, where does this line up with how I see Scripture, and where does it not? Like, I always do that. What I don't feel the need to do is to take
and go public with it and blast it all over the internet for everyone and their mom's friends and everyone to hear and do all these different things. If you had an opportunity to maybe go to, let's say, Pastor Stephen Furtick and present your arguments or your criticism to him one-on-one, and then after that conversation go and post your thoughts on the internet, more power to you.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
And
even then, it would only be with relational equity.
Yeah.
Like, I'm in some fantasy world, he's like, Russ, I'd really like your
opinion on this.
But I think the last part is where hopefully I didn't take us into a negative headspace with this one. I just think, again, I'm thankful for every email or comment that comes in. I just think sometimes it can be a good experiment to test our thought process, our level of thinking. And so what I found was really interesting is the last sentence said, it is not a spirit of criticism. So my pushback is, you don't know if it is. Because he said it's not, it's okay to be subjected to criticism. The Bible's clear, and we should keep ourselves on guard. But that has to do with content, not the spirit.
Keeping yourself on guard.
Against like false teachers.
Yeah.
But that has to do with content, not the spirit. I mean, everything this person described that we should do is what the Pharisees did. They based their teaching on the Scripture.
Yep.
And they were on guard against false teaching. And they were really adamant about it. And they were really wrong.
Yeah.
Because their motive was wrong and their spirit was wrong. So it was. So what we learned from that and from 1,000 other realities is that I can be completely right in content and completely wrong in spirit. And that, I think, is the point of what you were saying. It's not, do you disagree with someone's teaching? Mm-hmm. It's not, do you try to sift through with critical thinking and say, I think they missed it on that. A critical spirit, on the other hand, may be, man, instead of giving my life to serve and build the local church and love people well, I'm going to spend the bulk of my energy lumping, stereotyping, critiquing.
Yeah.
I'm going to go into churches not to have the posture of Samuel, speak, Lord, your servant is listening, and receive and worship. I'm going to go into churches. I'm going to walk into messages. I'm going to walk into books with my eye fault finding from the get-go, looking for what I can tear apart, looking for what. And so to the last sentence, it is not a spirit of criticism. Maybe not. You don't know something's a spirit of criticism based on the content alone.
I just think we have today created this, especially with social media. I know a lot of people you follow. We've created just this really, really wide canyon of a category called false teacher. And if basically, to people today, they throw around words like that and heretic when that's not heresy.
Yeah.
The things they'll point out.
That's
is
a
not,
serious
is,
accusation.
Is serious accusation is not heresy if you actually understand what heresy is. And you can try to, based on your theology versus someone else's theology, pick and find fault at it. But to me, I feel like the essence in Scripture, in the New Testament, of false teachers are people that were leading people away from, I'm going to say, even the most elementary and important part of the gospel of who Jesus is.
Yeah.
And when Jesus says, watch out, there's going to be false teachers, people who come in my name and say, I'm the Messiah, there's this idea that we have that it's like, oh, well, they don't teach dispensationalism. They're false teachers because of what they believe about. Again, we're in the series. Like you pick one of these categories, and it's like you're just so sure that your theology is the one theology that is God approved.
Your pre-trib, your post-trib,
you're just any of those, and it's like, wait a minute, I don't care which one of those. Mm-hmm. Do you preach that Jesus was the Son of God, sent to this world to give his life, a perfect sacrificial lamb, sacrificial, who died for the sins of this world, not for his own, who was buried and raised again on the third day, who is seated with the Father in heaven, that his death brings life eternal for everyone? I have a feeling that if you take all those pastors that are mentioned in the other comment and you ask them about those, I have a feeling you're going to find a whole lot more agreement. But then we're going to get into all kinds of ecclesiology and different things about, practice and methodology, and, it's like
secondary issues.
Just stuff that is like, give me a break. Like we have these camps that have developed all of these ways of thinking and go, if you don't join me, then you're a false teacher. And
it's like,
no.
It's like people forget even that the whole church spread from a group of about 50 people in Jerusalem to what it is today. For hundreds of years, there was no systematic theology books. The Bible, even as we know it, wasn't even compiled until later on in time. And so it's like, what? So you're saying the apostles and the early church fathers that didn't even have these works or these books like to preach from or to build from? Like, you're saying that they're heretics or false teachers? Like, I mean, they didn't even have this kind of stuff to be able to spread.
And the early church fathers practiced icons and paedo-baptism. I was reading about that yesterday. Almost all the early church fathers believed in infant baptism.
I have read that, yes.
Yeah, it's
so I appreciate that people are listening, and I appreciate their feedback. If you give feedback, then we're gonna at least and we could be missing some. This is the problem. Let me just say this: we're making some pretty potential false assumptions about your comments as much as you're making some false assumptions about us.
Yeah.
And that's fair.
It's fair
both ways.
So
it's
just
fair.
be
So
specific.
it's hard. Like if you're going to go on there and go, you said this, and I don't agree with this, that we can dialogue and talk about. And can say why I believe this or say this. It's really hard when you kind of start, again, this is, both those comments go into the same kind of what I'm saying pet peeve, is you're just going to lump in, well, you use some language that person used, and they've got some crazy theology. They might. I don't know. But there's only so many words in the English language that we have to try to do this and distinguish ourselves from everybody else and, this. And so I think don't assume motive of that person and their heart and what they believe theologically just because they happen to use that word. Well, in our camp, we don't use that word. And so that seems like you're part of this group. And a lot of assumptions.
Yeah. So,
I'd say that's.
So as a challenge, because our goal is we want this to feel like a podcast community family. Like we want to welcome feedback. So the challenge is keep sending feedback. Be more specific.
Yeah.
Don't use tribal language. Don't use assumptions. Don't lump in. Like I really actually am curious. Like not even in a mad way. I'm curious what NAR language we used. I want to know. I'm curious to look at it and dissect it.
Yeah.
And if there's an area, good grief, every day of my life I need to grow in 1,000 areas.
I'm just not. Yeah, I need to do a little bit more because just what little bit I've heard previous.
Yeah.
And what I've even just was quickly reading, I'm just leery of we have labeled certain people and groups. We've created a label that we want to define and say it means this, and now we get to pick and choose what churches and which pastors that we want to put in it. So be careful what language, because we might throw you in it. and I'm just like, really? That's what we've created?
I just wanted to end with this. What?
No,
you got some?
No.
We don't have to end on that, but before we end, I wanted to read this Brady Shear post. I don't know if y'all saw it. It was a slide he did yesterday.
He sent it to me.
I'm going to read it. Post about a big church with an emphasis on creativity, and it's, quote, they're watering down the gospel. Post about a lesser-known church reaching people on YouTube, and it's, quote, online church is destructive. Post about an outlier church actually reaching Gen Z, and it's, quote, women pastors don't count. Post about a church growing because they're focused on TikTok, and it's, quote, they're leading young people astray. Post about a pastor with a church that has a thoughtful online strategy, and it's, quote, he's a false prophet. Post about a traditional church doing kingdom work, and it's, quote, well, they're not evangelical. You want to push your pet theology and fight in the comments, do it somewhere else. Every church is unbiblical to thousands of others, including yours. I read that yesterday. I was like,
that was well done.
That's
Well done.
I will say this just kind of as an end, and it had nothing to do. Again, the whole episode, and maybe we just didn't.
Are you going to say who it was?
No, I was just going to say the whole episode previous, what we were talking about, the spirit of it was not about like, hey, don't criticize us for something that we do or something that we say. That wasn't it. It was this just can we do better than just kind of taking an entire subset of church, and because of maybe one or two people or your experience, or maybe you had experience where you didn't feel like discipleship was deep enough or worship was long enough or whatever, can we just stop like stereotyping, number one, and saying that all churches, that if they're a certain size or if there's certain use language, we're going to add this, that there's something wrong with them. Like there's always something wrong with every church. I know that. And there's different camps and different theological things. I just think the spirit of the conversation we had was, why is it that all we hear is about the negativity? This is what's so funny, is Christians are the first to point out that news media, all they do is they go on fear and they speak on negative stuff, because it's almost like, if you're a Christian, you should recognize the evil of media. And that's what they do. And I'm sitting there going, that's what a bunch of Christians do. Because all they ever do is talk about how bad the church is, how bad it's gotten, and how awful it is. And all I know is there are tons of pastors like us and others that are just trying their freaking best. And they're reaching people, and there are stories of life change happening all the time. I have several pastors. Part of it is me defending my pastor friends. I don't even care about us. Like they're doing really good things. I know them, and I know their heart, and I know they care about people, and I know this. And so when you just keep creating this whirlwind of negativity that you're spreading through all of your podcasts and your social media stuff, and putting this in everybody else's mind, then all of a sudden people are like, man, the church is just useless today. Man, wish we could just go back to the good old days. Really? I don't think they were the good old days. I think every generation thinks that they lived in the good old days and everything was preferential, and the next generation is the one that is failing, and the one before it just didn't get it. Like, this has been going on forever. I just think it's absurd. I think we're overly negative. There are so many amazing churches doing so many amazing things, small, medium, and large, and it never gets airplay, and nobody's talking about the impact the church was making. And this is where I kind of wish the rapture was real. I'm just kidding.
Whoa. Okay. Heresy alert.
This is where I kind of wish we could see and know what the world would look like without the church at all. The church is so awful, remove the church. I'm curious what the world would be like. My guess is it wouldn't be a great place. And so, I'm just going to continue to jump on this high horse, and I'm not talking about our church. I'm just thinking, I'm just going to defend churches in general. I don't care what their theology is.
This is a good one to end on. Remember that video I sent you?
Theology?
No, I'm just saying, I don't care.
Because someone will copy and paste that.
Sure. Go ahead. I don't care. Copy and paste it. He doesn't care about people's theology. I'm saying I'm not going to. There are some churches in our own town that they have theological beliefs that I do not agree with.
On secondary issues.
Yes. Secondary, which we love. Here's the problem. We get bored when it doesn't just deal with a primary central gospel issue of Jesus, resurrection, life and death, eternity. We just, in the church world, that's boring. Let's move on beyond the elementary teachings of Christ. Now let's just nitpick everything else and find out where we're different. And there are some churches that we have very different thoughts about eschatology, about just, I could go on, about even church world, about a lot of different things. And I remember something my father-in-law always said when we'd have people who would, because people come to our church just like people from our church go to other churches, and then they complain about the last church they were at. I was at so-and-so church, and I just remember something my father-in-law said years and years ago, and it's always stuck in the back of my head. Even if I don't believe someone's theology, even if I think some of their theology might be a little crazy, I don't even know if it borderlines heresy or not, but whatever, is just I don't ever want to criticize God's anointed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's really hard. I mean, you can sit there and go, they're not God's anointed, but I don't know that I get to make that call.
Yeah.
I think about David and Saul. And I think there was the guy who had the attitude of, I am not going to lay a hand, and I'm not going to do this. Even though Saul was not in the right on most of the stuff, David refused to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I always just remember my father was like, you know what? I'm not going to criticize what God has blessed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. On a practical note, and I'll let you inspire us back
Okay.
up. On a practical note, when you send in emails, if I can also just give a challenge, or if you send in podcast comments or whatever, like give us like at least like tell us your name or where you're from.
They probably don't want to.
Because I try to one of the particular comment was like from Queen B 9597, and I click on it, and it's just, and I know that the probably not the intention is to look like you're an anonymous commenter, and we're not public figures, but because of a podcast it may appear more public than most, and anonymous is just really like an annoying
keyboard warrior.
It feels like keyboard warrior. So we would like to have conversations with actual people. So at the end of every podcast, we give our email, podcast@thex.church. But whether you choose to do email or YouTube comment, that's fine. But let us, like, I don't know, give us, help us talk to an actual person. Tell us your name. We don't want to combat an anonymous YouTube bot.
Is that what it is? I don't think those are YouTube bots.
I was going to end by saying your comment about wondering what the world will look like without the church, and you just wonder if the world wouldn't feel the impact of the church missing. It just brings me back to that YouTube interview I sent you. I think it was on Easter Eve with noted atheist Richard Dawkins.
Oh yeah,
where he was talking about how he doesn't believe in anything
cultural.
He doesn't believe in anything that Christianity has to say. But he labeled himself a cultural Christian and said that he believed that culture is way better with the values and the practices of the church in the culture. So even someone who doesn't even believe.
Richard Dawkins?
Yes.
Yep. That's big coming from Richard Dawkins.
I mean, he just said he would remove anything and everything spiritual, supernatural. But I mean, it is interesting to hear him say. It was fascinating to hear him say that, like, hey, there are morals and practices and values they do that I think are beneficial to culture. And so he was like, I mean, he made himself real clear. I don't believe in that, but I'd be fine calling myself a cultural Christian.
Yeah, I'd say coming from him or Christopher Hitchens, they're the two most like dogmatic military atheists of the last century.
So the church has a lot to offer the world.
Oh,
and people, there's a lot that.
I just think there's a lot of good, and that doesn't get airplay. I'm not saying it needs to. I'm just saying it's just what we have all these watchdog Christians. These are not outside the church. These are watchdog Christians with their Bibles out, scanning messages, looking for a line that they can just say and point to and say some kind of theology or infers that, it's like.
And the empathy side of me wants to say sometimes it's a sad experience of people not feeling any purpose, that there's this much time and energy to just try to tear down others. And so
unless they would say that is their purpose.
Yeah, I would just say God created you for more.
I just don't see that gift listed.
Yeah, so my
in the body
my
of
2
Christ.
cents would be, go be too busy doing good and creating and building and serving and loving that you don't have time to critique others. I don't know. I don't have time. I don't have any energy or desire or time. Like when I hear about somebody in this denomination or this church that's preaching Jesus and loving people, I just want to. They may be so different than me. I would do things so different than them, And there's probably 1,000 secondary issues that if we had a cup of coffee and we had a good rapport, I'd have fun debating them like crazy.
Sure.
But for now, I just want to cheer them on.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? You don't see and hear a lot of pastors critiquing other pastors while they're in ministry.
It's true.
The people we're talking about, none of them were in ministry anymore, critiquing.
Mm-hmm.
Not individual pastors,
Mhm.
but I'm going back to that comment. Maybe because they're too busy actually doing ministry.
Mhm.
And so maybe take it a little bit of a challenge and I'm not saying that's just all what these people do in comments, but don't make it your world and think it's your ministry to go around and critique other people's ministries, because that's not a ministry and that's not in the scriptures that
Mhm.
I've read.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a ministry.
Mm-hmm.
That's,
Yeah.
or if it is, it's not a ministry of God.
Yeah. Yeah.
It might be a ministry of the accuser of the brethren.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well,
I'll just say,
We were landing the plane.
I'm referring to some of the
PZ,
social
give us
media-
another thought.
I'm referring to some of the social media heroes.
I know.
I'm referring to some of the social media heroes that have built a really good following and make
Yes.
probably pretty good money on YouTube,
Yes.
continuing to create content
Yes.
in that regard.
Yes.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Not people that share comments like this. I'm talking about actual people that are constantly
yes, I know.
taking videos and putting them out there and cutting them up and going, you're false
Mhm.
preacher, heretic.
Yeah.
I feel like I know scripture well enough that I can kind of spot what I would say is like heresy
Mhm.
when I hear it preached.
Mhm.
Like, there are things with other pastors that we'll talk about internally that are like, that's ultra political / Christian nationalism. I'm not necessarily going to say you're a heretic because of that, because that's not what it means.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I just think there's, and I'm not going to go advertise that.
Mhm.
I just think we just
Yeah.
need to do a little bit better.
Yeah.
And that's not aimed at any of those comments. That's more of in
Yeah.
line with what we were talking about
Right.
last week. And I think I've just let people guess as to who we're talking about, because I had somebody else text me that was listening to it today.
Yeah.
And they were like, was it so-and-so? I said, well, that is a person, but that's not the primary person that we were talking about. And we said we'd maybe tell people, but, maybe we won't. Because then we're just going to get more critique. So,
PZ got a Disney quote you want to give us to
a
end?
Disney quote.
Do you do anything with vision? Walt Disney.
There you go.
I butchered the quote, but it's something like that.
He didn't even get it right. So let's end. We're done.
All right. Head to Florida. All right. This hopefully has been helpful, at least thought-provoking. And let us know your thoughts. Send in a lot of comments. Who knows? They might end up on.
Sending comments in now. Will.
So, yeah.
Or if we got you wrong on your comments, please tell us where we had a lot of false assumptions, because we probably did as well.
And be specific about it.
Yeah,
Be
so
specific.
so we cannot assume.
Yes. All right. Until next time, let's keep elevating the conversation and loving better. And we will see you next week. Hey guys, it's Russ. Thanks so much for listening. We really believe if we can get around tables instead of behind screens, if we can talk to each other instead of at each other, we can make the world better. To help us do that, here are a few things you can do to help. First, if you haven't yet, leave a review on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe on YouTube. This helps more than you know. Also, if you have been impacted by the community out of which this podcast comes, that's X Church. Maybe you're local or you've been touched by the messages and impact across the country, even the world. I want to encourage you to support this work. A powerful life principle is to invest in the people and places that invest in you. And so I want to invite you to do that right now by going to thex.church/give. You can give a one-time small gift, a sacrificial gift, or even become a recurring partner. Together, let's keep elevating the conversation, thinking higher, loving deeper, and making the world better. Cheers.